After my dad's funeral, my brother-in-law mocked me in front of everyone, saying, "You don't belong here anymore." But when I handed him my father's final letter, he dropped to his knees trembling. "My name is Delilah, I'm 47, divorced, no kids. I teach high school English in Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of small city where everyone still says good morning when they pass you on the sidewalk, and your neighbors know your business whether you like it or not. I grew up here, left for college, and came back when my dad got sick. He was all I had left, really." My dad, Raymond Morris, was the kind of man you don't see too often anymore. Military vet, devoutly private, steady as a stone. After my mom left us when I was 10, he raised me and my sister, Helen, on his own. He wasn't perfect, but he was loyal. Old school. The kind of man who taught you how to change a tire and how to make soup from scratch in the same weekend. When he had his first stroke 2 years ago, I moved back into the old house to take care of him. It wasn't even a question. He'd done everything for us. I owed him that much, and more. Helen didn't agree. She lived in Charlotte, just an hour away, but she barely visited. Her husband, Dean, always had an excuse: work, traffic, the kids' schedules. Helen never argued. She became distant, like she was ashamed of Dad needing care. Like it embarrassed her. I'd lie if I said it didn't hurt, but I let it go. Everyone has their way of coping, right? Well, turns out, some people don't cope. They manipulate. They take. Dad passed peacefully in his sleep this past spring. I was with him when it happened. Held his hand until his breathing stopped. The next morning, I called Helen. She cried over the phone, saying she'd come out for the funeral. Said Dean would come too. I should have known what was coming. But grief blinds you. It quiets the warnings. Makes you hope when you should prepare. The funeral was small and quiet. Dad didn't want anything big, he hated attention. We held the service at St. John's, the church where he used to volunteer every Saturday. Played his favorite hymn. Said our goodbyes. Afterward, everyone came back to the house. His house. The one he'd grown up in. The one he rebuilt after the kitchen fire in '97. The one he never left, even when the stairs got hard and the walls got too quiet. That house was my heartbeat for decades. People brought casseroles and fruit trays. They shared memories in the backyard under the oak tree. I floated through it all in a fog, saying thank you and hugging people I hadn't seen since high school. Then Dean opened his mouth. I was standing in the living room, near the fireplace. Dean swaggered in like he owned the place, holding a drink and talking loud enough for everyone to hear. He looked around, snorted, and said, "Guess you'll have to find a new place to haunt, huh, Delilah? You don't belong here anymore." At first, I thought I misheard him. Then I saw the looks on people's faces. No one laughed. Not one. He kept going. "What's the plan now, huh? Sell it?" Helen and I were talking about putting it on the market. Lot's too big for one person anyway. Helen sipped her drink. Didn't even blink. I stood there, frozen. My father wasn't even on the ground for 12 hours. I had packed up his slippers that morning, with shaking hands, and this man, this loud, smug, self-centered man, was already circling like a vulture. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked down the hall to Dad's study. There, in the top drawer of his desk, was the envelope. I'd seen it before. He gave it to me a week before he passed. "Don't open it yet," he'd said. "Wait until you really need to." So I waited. Until that moment. I walked back into the living room. The energy shifted the second I returned. People sensed something. Dean looked amused. Helen finally looked uncomfortable. I handed the envelope to Dean. "It's from my father," I said. "You should read it." He smirked. "What is it, a grocery list?" He opened it anyway. I watched the expression drain from his face, like someone pulled the plug on a spotlight. His jaw clenched. Eyes darted. Knees started to bend. And then, right there, he dropped. On. Hi. Knees. In front of everyone. The room went dead silent. Helen looked at him, then at me. What's in it? I didn't answer. I took the letter back and read it myself. I had to. I read it slowly. Every word like a nail in the coffin Dean thought he'd buried me in. Delilah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know that I saw everything. I saw your sacrifice, your loyalty. You gave me dignity at the end. I leave this house, and every asset I own, to you. I want you to have peace and a place to remember me. You are the only one I trust. As for Helen, I love her, but she made her choices. And as for Dean, he knows what he did. You'll find what you need in the safe behind the study bookshelf. Use it if you must. I trust your judgment. Always proud of you, Dad. I looked up. Helen's face was pale. Dean was still on his knees, hands shaking. I didn't say another word. Not then. Not yet. Because the next part, the safe, the documents, the truth about what Dean had been doing behind our backs, is what came after. And that's the part no one was ready for. I didn't sleep that night. After everyone left, and I mean everyone, because Helen and Dean both got in their car and drove off without saying a single word, I went back into the study. I stared at the bookshelf like it might open itself if I waited long enough. Dad had always loved mysteries. He was the kind of man who never lost his taste for Agatha Christie or old detective flicks. The idea that he left something for me, something he clearly didn't trust a lawyer or court to handle, made my hands shake. The shelf was an old wooden one, built into the wall. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books, his old law textbooks, family photo albums, that massive first edition Bible from his mother, and then I found it. A slight difference in the grain behind the books on the second shelf from the bottom. A small latch behind a fake panel. It opened with a quiet click. Inside was a fireproof box. I carried it to the desk, sat down, and opened it with the key Dad had taped inside the drawer. Inside were 3 folders. Neat. Labeled. Dean Financial Activity, Correspondence, POA Misconduct, Witness Statements. I flipped through the first one. Bank statements. Pages of them. Highlighted transfers from my father's primary account, small amounts at first, then larger. Each to a company named Mountain View Holdings LLC. I'd never heard of it. But the address matched a strip mall in Charlotte. A P.O. box, specifically. Second folder, emails. Printed screenshots. Some were between Dean and someone named T. Madsen, discussing how much longer the old man will hold out and whether Helen's too close to figure it out. Another was a transfer order from an investment account, with my dad's digital signature, but I knew for a fact that he didn't use a computer without help. The last folder, that one hit the hardest. It included a notarized affidavit from Dad's friend Richard, his golf buddy, who also happened to be a retired bank manager. Richard had suspected something off when Dad tried to make a withdrawal 6 months ago but didn't seem to remember authorizing certain transfers. He'd asked questions. That must have tipped Dad off to dig deeper. There was also a typed letter, from my father to his lawyer, explaining that he believed his son-in-law had manipulated or coerced him while under medication after his stroke. I sat back in the chair, stunned. This man, Dean, my sister's husband, had been draining our father's accounts. While Dad was in and out of the hospital, barely remembering the day, he was robbing him blind. Probably thinking Dad was too far gone to notice. Probably thinking I was too busy wiping drool and cooking soft food to understand financials. I didn't cry. Not yet. I made copies of everything the next morning and took them straight to Dad's lawyer. Mr. Harrington was old school too. He wore suspenders and still used a fountain pen. When I placed the folders on his desk, he frowned. When he read through them, his hands shook. "Your father came to me just 2 weeks before he died," he said. "Said he was preparing something just in case." He didn't go into detail. But this explains it. He told me the will was ironclad. Everything, house, assets, accounts, was left solely to me. Helen was left a note. No money. No part of the estate. Just a letter, which Mr. Harrington hadn't mailed yet. "She'll come for it," he said. "She'll come angry." And she did. 4 days later, I was in the backyard, pulling weeds in Dad's garden. The daffodils had started to wilt, and I didn't have the heart to replant yet. I saw her through the kitchen window before she knocked. Helen looked thinner than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back tight, face pale and blotchy. She didn't say hi. Didn't ask how I was holding up. She just said, "How dare you?" I wiped my hands on my jeans. "You should talk to Dean." "I did talk to him," she snapped. "He said you're trying to turn everyone against us. That you made him read some fake letter at Dad's funeral." I held her gaze. "It wasn't fake. Delilah," she said, voice shaking, "we were supposed to inherit that house together. Dad wouldn't do this." I walked her inside. Sat her down at the kitchen table. And I showed her the documents. At first, she pushed them aside. Wouldn't look. Then, when I turned over the second folder, the emails, she went quiet. I didn't even need to say anything. Her eyes scanned the words. Her mouth opened. Closed. She pressed a hand to her lips. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Oh my God. I didn't know." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then she said something that stayed with me. "He told me Dad wanted to start downsizing. He asked Dean to help with the accounts." I believed him. "That was your first mistake," I said softly. She asked what I planned to do. I told her the truth. I was pressing charges. Fraud. Misappropriation of funds. Torment of power of attorney. I saw her flinch. "Del, don't. Please. Don't do this to the kids." And that's when the last sliver of sympathy in me cracked. "I didn't do this to the kids," I said. "Dean did. You let it happen. You left me here alone with a sick man. You chose convenience. He chose theft. And now you want pity?" She didn't reply. Just stood, numb, and walked out. I watched her car disappear down the street and didn't feel relief. Just a strange emptiness. A stillness that sat in my chest like fog. Helen didn't come back after that. No phone call, no text, no email. Nothing. Not even a lawyer's letter. For a while, I thought maybe she was waiting for me to cool off. That's how she used to handle confrontation: wait it out, pretend it didn't happen, and hope everything resets. But this wasn't spilled wine on the carpet. This was a fraud. Elder torment. A betrayal that dug straight to the bone. The lawyer filed the necessary paperwork. Dean was served in Charlotte about 2 weeks later. I didn't go, I didn't need to. The evidence was there, laid out clean and simple. He pleaded not guilty at first. Smirked in court, like the charges were beneath him. But as more documents came in, including the witness statement from my father's former financial advisor, his face started to change. That smug air cracked. His lawyer started talking about settlements, reduced charges, and repayment. It wasn't just my word anymore, it was my father's. And it was written in ink. Meanwhile, the house grew quieter. I still slept in my old room, though it barely felt like mine anymore. I'd hear a floorboard creak and half expect Dad to shuffle out in his robe, asking if I'd made coffee. I still made it every morning, out of habit more than anything. Black, the way he liked it. I kept the front porch light on, like he used to. Told myself it was for safety, but really, it was for him. As if somehow, that light might guide him back, just once, for one more talk. One night, about 3 weeks after the court filing, I got a knock on the door around 10:15 p.m. I knew before I opened it that it was Helen. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her sweater hung loose on her shoulders, and her eyes were glassy. She didn't ask to come in. She just said, "He's moving out." I stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame. And I filed for separation. For now. I don't know. There was a long silence between us. The cicadas were loud that night. Then she added, "I read Dad's letter. The one you had. Mr. Harrington mailed me a copy. I sat in the driveway for an hour after." I nodded. "I figured." She looked up at the porch light. "He left me nothing." "No," I said. "He left you a chance to be better." She blinked. That stung, I could tell. But it needed to. "I didn't know what Dean was doing," she said quietly. "But maybe I should have. Maybe I didn't want to know." "I was here every day, Helen," I said. "Every fall. Every hospital visit. Every time he forgot where he put the scissors. And you were an hour away." She flinched. "You told me it was too much for the kids. That it was too depressing. But he never asked for much. Just time." She sat down on the porch steps without asking. I almost told her to leave, but instead I sat beside her. There was something heavy about that silence, two grown women, once close, now sitting like strangers in their father's shadow. "Do you remember when we played in the attic?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "With the dress-up box?" "Yeah. With Mom's old scarves. You always wore that green one." We laughed. Softly. Sadly. And just like that, I remembered, Helen used to be my best friend. We stayed on the porch until almost midnight. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. But something cracked open. A sliver of shared grief, maybe. Or a memory that refused to rot. The next morning, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. Dean had agreed to a plea deal. He would plead guilty to multiple counts of financial elder torment, with a suspended sentence, probation, and restitution to me from whatever assets he had left. His license to practice real estate would be revoked. Public record. I hung up the phone and didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. There's something deeply hollow about justice. It doesn't fill the space you thought it would. It doesn't bring people back. It just rearranges the furniture around the damage. The Morris house was quiet again. But for the first time, I realized something: it was mine. Every creaky floorboard. Every scratch on the banister. Every faded photograph in the hallway. Mine. Not as a prize. But as proof. Of love. Of truth. Of surviving the kind of betrayal that doesn't make headlines, but cuts just as deep. I didn't hear from Dean again after the plea deal was finalized. That alone felt like a gift. His name stopped showing up in my inbox, in Helen's voicemail rants, in family conversations. He became this ghost in the narrative, no longer the threat, just the wreckage left behind. Helen sent me a text 2 weeks later. Just one sentence. "I'm sorry, truly." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. What is the right response to a years-late apology? Especially when so much of the damage was done not through malice, but neglect? She came by one more time in late spring. The dogwoods had started blooming again, the same way they did when we buried Dad. This time, she brought a casserole. Old school. Chicken and rice. "I figured you wouldn't eat unless someone forced you," she joked, through her eyes didn't meet mine. We sat in the kitchen. She looked around like she was expecting Dad to walk in any minute. "I had a dream last night," she said. He was standing in the yard. Just standing. Watching the trees. I didn't say anything. I've had the same dream more than once. She eventually asked if she could see his study. I let her. I followed her in, watching her trace her fingers along the desk like it might still hold warmth. When she saw the empty envelope in the drawer, she touched it gently. He really loved you, she said. In a way I think I didn't let him love me. That sat between us, heavy and sharp. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She knew. Before she left, she paused in the hallway, near the photos. You remember the trip to Myrtle Beach? She asked. When I got sunburned so bad I couldn't wear anything but that ugly oversized t-shirt? I nodded. You looked like a tomato for a week. She smiled. I found a picture of us building that sandcastle. I had it printed and framed. Gonna give it to Anna, she's been asking about Grandpa. That was the first time she'd mentioned her daughter since this whole thing began. I'd like to meet her sometime, I said. I'd like that too, she whispered, and then she was gone again. That summer moved slowly. Hot, heavy days followed by cooler, lonely evenings. I worked in the garden, restoring the vegetable beds Dad used to keep. Grew too many tomatoes. Gave half of them away to the neighbors. It felt good to have something to tend, something that needed me. One morning, while clearing out a patch of overgrowth by the fence, I found something. Buried under a layer of leaves was a small rusted tin box. I knew it immediately. It was the time capsule Dad helped us bury when I was 12 and Helen was 14. I hadn't thought about it in decades. I brushed off the dirt and opened it right there on the grass. Inside were 2 Polaroids, one of me holding our old cat Mr. Pickles, and another of Helen pretending to be a reporter with a paper towel roll as a microphone. A note from Dad, written in faded blue ink, for my girls. May you always be as close as you were today. A pink beaded bracelet I had made for him. And a folded paper with 2 simple lines, forgive. When you can. But protect what matters. Always. I sat there, cross-legged in the dirt, and cried harder than I had the day he died. Because he knew. Even then, he knew what mattered most in life wasn't wealth or legacy or control. It was loyalty. Protection. Forgiveness, with boundaries. That afternoon, I called Helen. I found the time capsule, I said. She didn't speak at first. Then I heard her sniffle. Dad always said we'd be glad we buried it, she murmured. Turns out he was right about a lot of things. We didn't say much more that day. But a door had opened. A small one. And this time, I didn't feel the need to slam it shut. I started writing again that fall. Just little pieces, journals, memories, notes from old stories Dad used to tell me. I turned the guest room into a small study, filled the shelves with our family's photo albums, and placed the framed time capsule letter on the wall above the desk. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt honest. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and see parts of him in me, his tired eyes, his calm hands. And it reminded me that legacy isn't just about land or money. It's about who shows up when things fall apart. Who stays. Who tells the truth, even when it hurts. Fall settled over Asheville with its usual slow grace, crisp air in the mornings, leaves turning red gold on the mountain ridges, and that faint smell of smoke that always reminded me of Dad's favorite flannel jacket. By then, the legal case had wrapped. Dean had officially been sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, mandatory restitution of over $68,000, and had his real estate license permanently revoked. That was the law's version of justice. But I still hadn't found mine. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't out for blood. I didn't want Dean in jail for life or dragged through the mud. I just wanted him seen. For what he was. For what he did. By the very people he used to manipulate and impress. And as it turned out, I didn't have to do much. Life handled that part for me. When word of his conviction got out, local news, a few neighborhood Facebook pages, even a write-up in a real estate newsletter he used to be featured in, his reputation crumbled. No one wants to work with a man who stole from his dying father-in-law. Especially in a community where people still trust a handshake over a contract. He lost his clients. His brokerage dropped him. Helen told me their HOA requested he step back from community involvement, which was code for getting lost, Dean. It didn't stop there. A few weeks later, I got an email from a woman named Clara. She was a retired accountant and had seen the news. She'd recognized Dean's name from a short-term financial consulting group in Charlotte she used to volunteer for. Turns out, he'd been helping an elderly couple with asset management during the same period he was stealing from Dad. They hadn't pressed charges, he hadn't taken anything, yet, just made questionable recommendations, but they immediately cut ties after seeing the article. Clara thanked me for coming forward. Said my actions may have spared someone else down the line. I didn't reply. I just sat with that feeling. That what I did mattered. That speaking up, even after so much silence, was worth it. But my true revenge, the one I didn't plan, came in the most unexpected way. Helen invited me to Thanksgiving. She hadn't hosted since our mom left, and certainly never with Dean around. But now, she was in a rented duplex in Charlotte, trying to rebuild her life with 2 confused teenagers and a whole lot of regret. I almost said no. But something in her voice, raw and unguarded, convinced me. I drove down with a pumpkin pie and a tight stomach. When I got there, her kids, Anna and Marcus, ran out to greet me. I hadn't seen them in over a year. They were taller, older, but still warm. They hugged me like nothing had happened. Helen was in the kitchen, apron on, hair tied back. The house smelled like sage and garlic and cinnamon rolls. She looked up, and for the first time in a long time, her face didn't carry that guarded weight. Just fatigue. And something close to gratitude. "I'm glad you came," she said simply. Dinner was surprisingly normal. We didn't talk about Dean. We didn't talk about the case. Just food, memories, and awkward teen stories that had me laughing so hard I nearly spilled cider on the table. After the kids left the room to play video games, Helen and I lingered in the kitchen. She handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "It's from Dad's garage. You'd left it behind." Inside were little pieces of our childhood, a photo of our dog Rudy, a clay ornament I'd made in 3rd grade, and one of Dad's old cufflinks, just one. I picked it up, and she said, "I kept the other one." We looked at each other, and I knew what she meant. We were never going to be the same. But maybe, just maybe, we could still match. That night, I drove home under a sky full of stars. The kind of night where the air is still, and everything feels possible again. And when I walked through the front door of Dad's house, my house, I didn't feel alone. Dean had taken so much. But in doing so, he revealed every fault line that needed healing. He exposed the rot so it could be cleared. He thought he was breaking me down. Instead, he forced everything fake to fall away. His downfall wasn't a courtroom or a headline. It was losing the audience. Losing the masks. Losing the story he'd built around himself, because now, the truth stood in the center of every room he entered. That was the revenge. That he had to live with himself. While I got to live in peace. Thanks for sticking with me. I wrote this not just to share a cautionary tale, but to say this: sometimes, justice doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it's just the truth, finally spoken, finally heard, and the quiet that follows when you no longer have to explain yourself to anyone. And if you've been betrayed by someone close, someone who wore family like a costume, just know this: you can rebuild. You can reclaim it.